Hello and many thanks for joining us. You're watching ATV English News from the Ethiopian Broadcasting Corporation. With the news, I'm Tabitha John. Do stay with us. The withdrawal of troops from Tigray is the result of a thorough and careful deliberation with responsible stakes, says Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. Delineating the matter to the country's parliament, the premier disclosed that the withdrawal was not a sudden military decision, but a clever step forward with careful procedures. Abiy pointed out that his government started to withdraw troops 1 month ago from different parts of the region before they fully withdrew from the capital, Mekelle. Solomon Danye tells us more.
The concomitant decision of the Ethiopian government to declare a unilateral ceasefire and fully withdraw troops from the state of Tigray took many by surprise. The unprecedented decision by the government perplexed and shocked many and demented some others. Though the government announced that it withdrew from the region in its own volition, parties affiliated with the TPLF clique were heard declaring victory against the government. Weeks after the incident, Prime Minister of Ethiopia Abiy Ahmed officially told his parliament that the decision was made after a careful deliberation with responsible stakes.
From the angle of military discipline, we have not been able to communicate that. We didn't pull out our forces when it was mentioned last time. It took more than 1 month. On 4 fronts, we've been pulling out our troops. From one side, while we're pulling our forces, not even you, not even the junta, understood what was going on. 15 days before the election also, we took several forces outside of Tigray. It was only when the third group was coming out, that was when there were suspicions from the side of Ethiopian. There were communications saying that a lot of army members are coming out with ammunition and so on. I'm talking about 2,000, 3,000 vehicles. There were attempts to block roads, to burn cars and so on.
Addressing whether his army was forced to withdraw because of conceding defeat, the premier had this to say.
The fourth one, the strongest force, was in Mekelle area. Thousands of cars left from there. They were in a favorable position, so it was not attacked. Even after they left, 2 days after they left, the junta were not able to get into that area. It's only people that celebrated. Had they been able to do that, they would not have let thousands of cars leave the area. But that's not the truth. The truth is that we need time to think. It's time the farmers want to produce on their lands, so we don't want to be the reason to stop that.
Explaining what leads to such an audacious decision, the premier said the country has other major challenges to deal with.
What really made us, get to this conclusion is that it's not the displaced people. Of course, we want to bring back displaced persons. We have corona in Ethiopia. We have shortage of oxygen ventilators. We want to buy that. All the projects you want to see completed that require huge investments and resources, we can't put them aside and deplete resources. We have returnees in large numbers. These are our citizens, so we have to work on them as well. The time of agriculture for agriculture is important on both sides. So if we can, what we said was if we can leave and see if things could be, better.
The Premier urged the public to carefully examine the misleading reports of paid international media houses about Ethiopia and rebuked Western governments who are working to bring a regime change in the country.
In today's deliberation, parliamentarians cautioned that the current inflation rate will continue unless the government takes robust actions to counter it. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, for his part, said 1 billion birr worth food items are to be imported in large quantities to reduce the cost of living. He also said the current inflation is caused by a huge imbalance of demand and supply, as well as unnecessary interference of illegal brokers in market chains. Goshu Melliso has the details.
A huge price hike has been witnessed in the cost of living due to the surge of COVID-19 and security problems here and there across the nation. And it's not showing a sign of improvement, rather, it is impacting citizens with low-level income. Members of the parliament reiterated their concerns the inflation rate will continue, citing how much the 2021-2022 approved budget considers reducing the cost of living.
Beginning from the 2019 budget year, your government was supporting the poor and was trying to bring down the cost of goods to a single digit, or the inflation to a single digit. However, it continued to be a challenge for the livelihood of citizens. The rate of inflation that has become a threat for our country. What are the policy actions you plan to take in order to reduce that?
Addressing members of the parliament, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed said 1 billion birr worth food items are to be imported in large quantity to reduce the cost of living in collaboration with cooperatives.
In this regard, the Minister of Finance explained in detail that the government has been trying to import food-related items with large amount of budget allocated, and sectoral associations are provided with $500 million in support. This is one area where people with lower income benefit from.
He also said the current inflation is caused by a huge imbalance of demand and supply, as well as unnecessary interference of illegal brokers in market chain.
But the main reason of the challenge is the difference between supply and demand. Supply, the need for supply is increasing, demand is increasing, but the supplies could not meet the needs. This creates high prices. Secondly, in the supply chain, problems in the supply chain, not only production problems, but the trade chains create problems.
According to the Central Statistical Agency, last month's figure, inflation measured by Consumer Price Index reached 19.2%, while food inflation surged to 23.1%. Non-food inflation increased to 14.5%.
In briefing the parliamentarians about the prospects of the country's economy, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed says government will pay due emphasis on transforming the agricultural sector to revamp Ethiopia's economy. The Premier also briefed members of the parliament concerning government actions to lift the country's economy. Demis Makreo has the details.
During the House of People of Representatives for special session, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed briefed parliamentarians concerning government priorities to revamp the national economy in the upcoming Ethiopian budget year. The Premier said government will pay much emphasis in transforming the agricultural sector so as to achieve food self-sufficiency and thereby enhancing the nation's economy at large. In so doing, the Premier underscored that improving agricultural productivity and scaling up irrigation will be prime focuses of a government, among other things.
የግብርና ሴክተር አሁን አጠቃላይ ኢትዮጵያ ከምታወጣው ወጪና ብድር አንፃር 9% ገደማ ነው ለግብርና ሴክተር እየወጣ ያለው።
The loan we provide to the agricultural sector has never surpassed 9% as compared to other sectors so far. We need to improve this and has to channel more resources to the agricultural sector. We need to also farm more arable lands that were not cultivated before to boost our agricultural produce. As a government, we will provide agriculture technologies and imports such as tractors and improved seeds to complement our farmers' effort.
The Premier also indicated that government will focus on import substitution to cut foreign currency expenses and encourage local production. He mentioned wheat and oil will be substituted in the near future.
ሌላው import substitution ነው እንደ ስንዴ ያሉ እንደ ዘይት ያሉ
We will provide ample support to our farmers to cultivate wheat locally. This enables us to provide bread to our people. We will also encourage local oil factories to boost production and cover local demand. In a nutshell, we will focus on making basic products locally and ensure food self-sufficiency. In doing so, we will grow and move to the path of prosperity eventually.
The Premier also indicated that scaling up the Green Legacy project will have positive impacts on the nation's economy. He called on Ethiopians to keep the momentum in planting trees, especially during this rainy season.
The House of People's Representatives has unanimously ratified over 561 billion birr for the upcoming Ethiopian budget year. The budget has shown 18% increment compared to the last Ethiopian fiscal year. Kazahun Jani reports.
The Fifth House of the People's Representatives of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia has held its fourth special session in its sixth year. Prime Minister Dr. Abiy Ahmed has responded to questions and suggestions raised by members of the House on the 2014 budget draft and carbon national issues.
COVID has been very challenging, global challenge. The locust was damaging. It did not actually bring about hunger. It has affected our agriculture to a certain extent, and there was also heavy rains and floods.
He pointed out that the financial sector of the country has been registering improvements, citing bank book holders number in Ethiopia has increased from 38.8 million to 66.2 million customers, resulting in massive fundraising.
And so this 10% would be completed with investment. So when we increase our investment, instead of consuming 80, this should come down to 70, 60. That would increase our local investment and boost our economic development. That's why we say we need to increase our saving. The current difference that we have is lower than 10, but if we increase our savings, would have more room for local investment. Vis-a-vis the financial sector, one is one that helps us saving the change in the bank system. 2 years ago, Ethiopians who have a bank account, it's true that one individual would have 2-3 accounts. There's only 37.8 people who had bank accounts. It's not to say that everyone has a single one, but the entire book accounts were 38-something million. But 2 years later now, 66.2 million customers are there in the banks.
The nation has also registered commendable performance in revenue earnings during the just ended fiscal year. According to the Premier, the nation's plan was to bring in 260 billion birr and achieved 98% of the plan, with more than 142 billion birr increase. In terms of project management, Abiy stated that the well-monitored sectors such as parks, industry and agro-industry have achieved better performance.
Agro-industrial parks, sugar parks, dams, road constructions, a lot of projects delayed for years, and they gave us economic pressures. So in order to complete these projects and come up with new projects, a lot of projects delayed for years, and they gave us economic pressures. So in order to complete these projects and come up with new projects were very challenging, but we're still here. But we're still in the path of development.
Savings have also increased by 30%, creating more capacity for loans, 74% of which was accessed by the private sector, he stated. During the occasion, the House of People's Representatives approved the budget of the federal government of Ethiopia for the upcoming Ethiopian fiscal year.
The total budget, 561.7 billion per expenditure. The amount allocated for the expenditure of the federal government is 162.17 or 29%. Capital expenditure, 183 billion for national and regional states, Dredwa administration and Addis Ababa city administration. Support budget of 203.95 billion, and money for the implementation of sustainable development goal is allocated with 12 billion birr. Out of the budget, the majority of support budget and the largest secondary level capital expenditure budget is allocated to regional governments.
On the occasion, it was said that out of the total 561.67 billion birr budget for the next year, 162 billion birr is allocated for recruitment spending, 163.5 billion birr for capital expenditure, 203.95 billion birr for subsidy to regions, and 12 billion birr for sustained development goals. It was noted that the budget has shown 18% an increment when compared to the budget of the last Ethiopian fiscal year. The meeting, which held at the Prime Minister's office, was attended by ambassadors of various countries, representatives of international organizations, religious leaders and invited guests.
Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed called on various countries across the world to recognize the genuine intention of the construction of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam GERD. The Prime Minister made the remark today during his response to queries raised by members of the House of People's Representatives on various current affair issues. During the occasion, he called on countries to realize that Ethiopia has no intention of harming others other than meeting its energy needs. Though so many things are being said and heard about the GERD, Abiy said that the only thing that Ethiopia wants is to address the country's demand for electricity without posing threats on the downstream countries. Abiy said that countries in the world have to recognize the fact that Ethiopia has no intention to harm others, but instead aspires for a shared development with cooperation. And finally, the National Electoral Board of Ethiopia has today announced that it will declare final results of the 6th general election in this week. Communication head of the board, Soliana Shimelis, has confidently expressed the board's capability to do so. She indicated polling results from all the stations have so far been collected by the Electoral Board. The remaining 30 election results have also been finalized and submitted to the board. You're watching Addis News Hour. A quick reminder of today's headline. Premier says withdrawal of troops from Tigray is the result of a thorough and careful deliberation. And that's all we had for now. I'm Tabitha John. Many thanks for watching. Have a good night.